But I'd like to start, you've all experienced so much in the course of your coverage, and I'm wondering if you could share with us something that lingers with you, something that really stays with you. I'm sure there are many things, but if you could pick one or so. Michelle, why don't you start?
I guess for me, it's probably, as Anna Maria said, the last foreign trip I had was reporting on the uprising in Yemen. I was there for about a month. And I was lucky that I'd been to Yemen once before, because it's not an easy country to pop into. But for me, it's actually a person that sticks with me. And it was this amazing woman who was at the head of the beginning of the uprisings. Her name was Carmen. And she'd actually been a civil rights activist for years, but we'd never heard of her. And it was just so amazing the first time I went out to the streets on the protests, and there she was. Right in the middle of it. And it was amazing because Yemen's a fairly conservative country. It's not uncommon to go, I would go sometimes half a day and not see another woman on the streets when protests were going on. And it was even more uncommon to see someone who didn't have their face, a woman who didn't have her face covered. And there was Telecall. And she was just such an inspiration. And I think for me, it just immediately smashed a lot of stereotypes that we have in the country. And so I tried to follow her throughout it, and I watched the local media a lot to see how she's doing, and I fear for her safety there.
Sonia?
I was in Egypt, and I think that the one image that sticks in my mind is one night in Tahrir Square when I was there, and this was, I think, towards the end of just before Mubarak stepped down. It was one of his speeches where he was on TV, and he was being sort of broadcast on this giant screen, and he looked terrible. He has this terrible, he has this dyed black hair, this really sort of spooky light coming up on him, and he was sitting on this podium, and then he would look up very sternly, and he was trying to sort of, I think, project the image of this patriarchal father figure man who was sort of chastising his children or trying to basically restore order to an unruly house. And you looked around in Tahrir Square, and people were, standing there, and they were shaking. In one hand, they would have shoes, which is, of course, a great insult in the Muslim world to shake a shoe at someone. And in one hand, they would have a shoe, and in the other hand, they would have their smartphone, and they were taking what was going on. That's the image that I'll take away. I think that it was. I think that it basically brought together these two very important aspects of the revolution in Egypt. One aspect being the social media aspect, how integral it was really to what happened, and the second aspect being just this amazing shift in attitude of these revolutionaries who no longer wanted a father figure. They wanted freedom, and to me that was absolutely stunning to see this literally play out in front of my eyes in this spirit.
Lynn?
I think for me it was it's almost a scene that's in my mind. It was in Libya, and we were going many days to Ashdabia, which is where the front was, where the fighting was. And on this particular day, the rebels were on one side of Ashdabia, and the Gaddafi forces were on the other side, and the fighting, fighting was going on over top. And we decided to go into the hospital where we had been before, into Ashdabia. And when we found it was deserted, there were just the doctor, a surgeon, and the staff there, and it was completely emptied out. And we interviewed the surgeon, and he talked about how it didn't matter to him if the people brought in were Libyan or Algerian or whatever. It didn't matter to him. He treated them all as Libyans. He didn't care what side they were on. And as we were leaving, this pickup truck came screaming up to the front of the hospital, just flying, and they were shooting in the air. And as the rebels in the back, they had a guy who was injured. And they were screaming Allahu Akbar over and over and over, which is often what they would do when somebody was injured and they thought he was dying. And he came screaming up to the front of the hospital, and as they were trying to get this guy out, one guy started shooting to try to get everybody back, shooting overhead. it was just this chaotic scene, and we thought they're bringing in a rebel to, you know, he's been injured in the field, and they went rushing, took him in. But actually, as what it turned out to be was that these rebels had been going house to house in Ashgabat looking for the enemy, and who had been in town the day before. And they came to a school, and as they were going through the school, they found a young Algerian soldier that's about 25 years old, hiding in there. And rather than be taken prisoner, this young soldier had taken his gun and shot himself under the chin. And their response was game off. They grabbed the guy, they put him in the back of his van, and they went flying to the hospital with this guy, running in. And I don't think that these guys could have been more upset if it was one of their own rebels there. They were just so intent on getting this guy to the surgeon. And the firing, as it turned out, was because they were concerned that there would be rebels there or people there who would attack this Algerian guy. And so they were trying to keep people away from him so they could get him in to see the surgeon. And then this rebel guy got back in his truck and drove off to the front, and it was game on again. You know, it was, I mean, it was one of these moments that just, I don't think I'll ever forget, because, you know, it was a moment of humanity in the midst of something that was anything but. And, you know, with all the contradictions inherent in it, I think it's something that said a lot about what's going on there.